Mark was used to mornings that felt like a race against time. As a single dad juggling two jobs, there was never enough sleep, never enough money, and never enough hours in a day. But he didn't complain. His life revolved around his 8-year-old son, Liam, and making sure he had a safe and happy childhood despite their financial struggles. That morning, Mark dropped Liam off at school. The sun had just started rising, painting the streets with a golden glow. But for Mark, it was just another day of stress. He waved goodbye to his son, watching him dash toward the school gate, backpack bouncing. Turning to head to his first job, Mark noticed a growing crowd across the street. A woman was collapsing on the pavement. Her face was pale, her hands pressed against her chest, and her breathing was shallow and erratic. A sudden wave of fear swept through the bystanders, but Mark didn't hesitate. He ran across the street, ignoring the honking cars and shouting pedestrians. "Somebody call an ambulance!" he shouted as he knelt beside her. The woman's eyes flickered open, panic and pain evident in them. Mark could feel her pulse racing and her hands trembling. He remembered the CPR training he had taken years ago, back when he had hoped to be more prepared for emergencies. Now it was coming to life. "Stay with me," he said firmly, pressing his hands where her chest needed support. "Help is on the way." Passers-by watched anxiously, murmuring about how brave this man was, but Mark didn't notice. His world had narrowed to the single task of saving her life. Minutes dragged by like hours. Sweat ran down his forehead, his arms ached, but he continued, unwilling to let fear or fatigue take over. Finally, the ambulance arrived. Paramedics rushed forward, taking over from Mark, and he stepped back, breathing heavily. The woman was stabilized and loaded into the ambulance. As it drove away, Mark wiped his hands on his worn jacket, feeling an odd mix of relief and exhaustion. He didn't expect recognition or reward. He had simply done what anyone would do if faced with the same situation, or so he thought. That evening, back in his small apartment, Mark reflected on the day. Bills were piling up on the kitchen counter, the fridge was nearly empty, and Liam had homework that needed checking. Heroism felt distant in a world of unpaid rent and overdue bills. Mark barely slept, replaying the scene over and over in his mind, wondering if he had done enough. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the woman was recovering. Her name was Elizabeth, and she was more than just a patient. She was a billionaire who ran a multinational company. The doctors were impressed by how quickly she had stabilized, thanks to the quick thinking of a stranger. She, however, was thinking only of one thing, the man who had saved her life. When she regained consciousness, Elizabeth demanded to meet the man who had run into traffic without a second thought. A few hours later, Mark received a call in from the hospital. Confused and hesitant, he agreed to come. Walking into the hospital room, he felt completely out of place. Elizabeth was poised, elegant, and radiated an aura of authority that made Mark's rough, tired appearance seem even more ordinary. "I'm Elizabeth," she said gently, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You saved my life today. I need to thank you properly." Mark shrugged, feeling awkward. I just did what anyone would do. I couldn't just stand there and watch." Elizabeth smiled, but her tone was firm. "No, Mark, what you did was extraordinary. It wasn't just bravery, it was selflessness, and that deserves recognition." Mark shifted uncomfortably, unsure what to say. He was used to being invisible, to living in a world where kindness rarely mattered beyond the walls of his small apartment. Yet here was someone immensely wealthy, acknowledging him in a way he had never experienced before. For a brief moment, he forgot his exhaustion, his bills, his worries. He was just a man who had acted without hesitation, and for once, that was enough. Elizabeth's expression softened. "I want to make sure your son and you are taken care of, not because I have to, but because you earned it with your courage and your heart. Please let me show you how much your actions mean." Mark's heart pounded, not with pride but with disbelief. He had spent his life surviving, never imagining that a simple act of courage could lead to something so profound. At that moment, The seed of a new chapter in his life was planted, one that would soon grow in ways he could never have imagined. A few days after the hospital encounter, Mark could hardly focus on his daily grind. His mind kept returning to Elizabeth, the woman he had saved, and the sincerity in her eyes. He had always been a realist, a man who measured life in bills, shifts, and responsibilities. Gratitude from a stranger, even a billionaire, felt surreal. Then came the unexpected invitation. Elizabeth wanted him to visit her office. The thought made Mark uneasy. He imagined towering skyscrapers, polished floors, and people in expensive suits, so different from the cluttered, worn apartment he called home. Still, curiosity and a sense of obligation pushed him forward. Stepping into Elizabeth's office was like entering another world. Glass walls stretched high, sunlight bouncing off every surface, and employees moved with purpose. Mark felt out of place in his faded jacket and jeans, clutching Liam's worn backpack like a shield. Elizabeth noticed his discomfort and smiled warmly. "Mark," she said, her voice calm yet commanding, "I want you to know something important. You saved my life without expecting anything in return. That courage, that kindness is rare, and it deserves to be honored." Mark shook his head, feeling awkward. "I didn't do it for thanks. I just did what I had to do." Elizabeth nodded, but her eyes softened. "I know. That's what makes it remarkable, because you didn't act for reward. You acted because it was right. And right now I want to help you and your son in any way I can. No strings, no charity, just gratitude." Mark's chest tightened. He had spent years scraping by, watching opportunities slip through his fingers. Could this really be happening? Could his life change because of one split-second act of bravery? Over the next few weeks, Elizabeth worked quietly behind the scenes. She arranged for Mark's rent to be secured for the next year, ensuring he would no longer live with constant financial anxiety. She enrolled Liam in a top-tier school, opening doors that Mark never thought possible. But she didn't stop there. One afternoon, Elizabeth invited Mark to a private meeting. "I have something special for you," she said, leading him into a smaller room filled with blueprints and plans. "I want you to run a small business, something you've always wanted, but never had the chance to start. I'll provide the capital, the guidance, and the network. You just need to bring your determination and heart." Mark stared at her, speechless. This wasn't a handout. This was a chance to rebuild his life, a chance to prove to himself and to his son that they could rise above their struggles. Tears welled up in his eyes. I don't know what to say," he whispered. "Say you'll take it," Elizabeth replied softly. "Say you'll give yourself a chance." And he did. Months passed, and Mark poured himself into his new business. With Elizabeth's mentorship, his small workshop flourished. He could finally afford better living conditions for Liam, provide him with opportunities he never had, and even set aside savings for the future. Every day, he remembered the moment he had rushed into traffic to save Elizabeth's life, unaware that act would set off a chain of events transforming both their worlds. But the greatest reward wasn't financial. It was the bond they had formed. Elizabeth visited often, not as a boss or benefactor, but as a friend. She admired Mark's integrity, his humility, and his unwavering devotion to his son. For Mark, Elizabeth became a symbol of hope and a reminder that human kindness, no matter how small it seems at the time, can ripple out in unimaginable ways. One evening, as Mark and Liam celebrated a small business milestone, Liam hugged his father tightly. "Dad," he whispered, "you're a hero. Not because of money, but because you saved someone's life. And look, it changed ours forever." Mark held back tears, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. In saving Elizabeth, he hadn't just rescued a life. He had unlocked a future for himself and his son. Courage, compassion, and selflessness had created a reality he had never dared to dream of. The story spread quietly at first, But soon social media picked it up. Headlines hailed a single dad hero, and people everywhere were inspired by the life-changing impact of a single act of bravery. Yet Mark remained humble, always redirecting attention from himself to the principle behind his actions, that one moment of courage can ripple into countless others, changing lives in ways beyond imagination. In the end, it wasn't wealth or fame that mattered. It was human connection, the bond between a man who acted without hesitation and a woman whose life was forever touched by his selflessness. The story of Mark and Elizabeth became a testament to a simple truth. In the grand scheme of life, a single act of kindness can create miracles that no money, no power, and no planning could ever achieve. And for Mark, that miracle wasn't just in the opportunities he gained. It was in the knowledge that he had done the right thing, and it had changed everything.